sermon to give you time to rest your legs and have a little shluch before the next moment of excitement. Psalm 122, our haftarah this morning, which was read by Mary, sung at coronations and other royal events, is the third in a sequence of 15 psalms that bear the inscription Shir HaMa'alot, a song of ascents. These psalms, says Robert Alter in one place, are framed for pilgrims to Jerusalem, crossing the mountains that are round about the city, making their way through the gates, across the ramparts, and to the palaces within. Most scholars do assume that the psalms are composed for pilgrims, but as Alter also says elsewhere, that term, Shir HaMa'alot, could also be a musical term, perhaps referring to an ascent in pitch or a crescendo in the song, or it could refer to the pattern of incremental repetition that is common to so many of these poems. These psalms probably go back to the Second Temple period, when the temple was the place of the central cult and a focus of national unity. Psalm 122 presents us with a prayer for Jerusalem's well-being, for tranquility, for those who love her, for peace within her ramparts, calm within her palaces. The poet's repetition in Hebrew of the word shalom, peace or well-being, which occurs 3 times in 4 verses, is clearly a play on the Hebrew word for Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. The poet creates a sense of peace, quiet, the shushing of any clatter or noise through his use of sibilants in the closing verses. Sha'alu shalom Yerushalayim, yishlayu ba'amonotayech, yehi shalom bechelech, shalva ba'amonotayech, lema'an achai v're'ai, adabrana shalom bach. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be at peace. May there be well-being within your ramparts, peace in your citadels. For the sake of my kin and friends, I pray for your peace. This psalm places the city of Jerusalem as the focus of our yearnings for peace, for well-being. There is an aesthetic simplicity to the psalm, as though its compactness of syntax and language convey the structure of the city's architecture, compactly built, a city that is khubra, joined fast together, with a quiet and certain permanence that permeates the poem. This psalm certainly lends itself to an expression of our own longing for peace in the land of our ancestors and in the lands of its neighbors. But I don't want to speak about Israel or Gaza or the West Bank today, but to read the psalm as an expression of what it means to be part of a community, specifically this community of the LJS. I rejoiced when they said to me, "We are going to the house of the Eternal One." This sanctuary witnesses many occasions of celebration and blessing, no less so today as we celebrate with Sarah and Samantha and their families and the family of little Joshua, whose naming will take place shortly. When we come together to stand within the walls of this sanctuary, walls made of Jerusalem stone, we become a community that is joined together, khubra. Our strength as a community derives from being bound together by our heritage, by relationships, our prayers, our music, our shared hopes and destiny. We are the tribes of the Eternal One who are drawn together for these moments of peace and tranquility, of rejoicing and our longing for happiness and peace. Both our Torah portion and Haftarah today focus on the act of worship. The priests, dressed in their sacred vestments, presiding over the sacrificial rituals of the Mishkan, day in and day out, obedient to the laws that dictate when each sacrificial offering is to be made. The priests live within a structure that demands holiness and purity. For if God's presence is to meet with the Israelites, and if they are to be sanctified by God's presence, Aaron and his sons must at all costs maintain a constant state of purity and perfection. Yet if we look closely at this week's parashah, there is an absence at its heart. It contains not one mention of Moses' name. In fact, this is the only parashah in the last 4 books of the Torah that does not explicitly mention Moses or include Moses as narrator. Several reasons are given for this absence. The Vilna Gaon of 18th century Lithuania suggests that this absence of Moses' name is related to the fact that Tetzaveh, the parashah, is read during the week in which the 7th day of the month of Adar falls, which was in fact yesterday. And this is the day that is traditionally held to be Moses' death. The absence of his name, says the commentator, expresses the sorrow and loss of Israel's greatest leader. Another commentator, Jacob ben Asher, known as the Baal HaTurim, in the late 13th and early 14th century Spain, draws attention to a verse in next week's Sedra in which Moses pleads with God to forgive Israel for the sin of the golden calf. If not, says Moses, blot me out of the book that you have written. The Talmud quotes the principle that the curse of the sage comes true, even if it were conditional. Hence, Moses' name was blotted out from this parashah in the Torah, was blotted out from the Torah. Another reason is given in a 13th century French commentary to the Torah, which relates that the absence of Moses' name to his reluctance, his initial reluctance to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Please send someone else, he says to God, at which God becomes angry with Moses and tells him that his brother Aaron will accompany him. It is for this reason that Moses forfeits the role he might otherwise have had of becoming the first of Israel's priests. Instead, the role goes to Aaron, and the Sedra is dedicated to Aaron and his sons, not to Moses. So underlying this Sedra, with its themes of perfection, holiness, and purity, there is also an imperfection. And Igor and I never spoke about what this sermon was or what you had to say about these ark doors. So an amazing act of synchronicity. So you feel underlying this Sedra a sense of sadness and of loss. When God calls Moses at the burning bush, the Midrash puts these words into his mouth. Here I am. I'm ready for priesthood and for kingship. This is in the Midrash, but God says to him, these are not for you, Moses. These are hereditary positions. The priesthood is for your brother Aaron and his sons. The kingship is for David and his sons. Moses' sons will not inherit his role, either as prophet or lawgiver. That sense of tragedy and loss is heightened further by the disaster that has been waiting to happen, the idolatry of the golden calf, God's anger, and Moses' desperation to seek pardon for the people. It's this episode, as I said earlier, that fractures the narrative. It breaks into the book of Exodus, into the whole of the Torah, in fact. the Israelites have all too quickly betrayed their acceptance of the Torah, of the covenant. And there is one other intimation of what is to occur in the days following the priest's ordination, when at the end of this week's Sedra, the priests are instructed not to offer strange or alien incense on the altar. We hear in the word zara, strange, an allusion to the tragedy that is to strike Aaron and his family, the death of two of his sons who offer up Eish Zara, strange fire, in the sanctuary in the days after their ordination. For me, this pilgrim psalm of 122 that speaks of rejoicing, tranquility, well-being and peace, the creation of the Mishkan as a place for God's presence to dwell in our midst, represent an ideal where the judges sit on their thrones of justice, where goodness and peace are sought for the sake of humanity. The Tel Aviv-born sculptor Danny Caravan's wall relief inside the Knesset, entitled Pray for the Peace of Jerusalem, taken from this psalm, aspires to that perfection in art, yet stands in stark opposition to the reality of the world in which we live. We live constantly between our yearning for wholeness and peace, for an end to sorrow and pain, and the radical injustices of deep suffering, war, loss, violence, and oppression. Standing together within these walls of our community, all of us here become part of a story, a narrative of hope that acknowledges sadness and injustice, but seeks heightened moments of gladness and rejoicing. May we all find our place in this community, in a narrative that can speak to each one of us, wherever we are in our lives, and that says to us, our feet are standing within these gates. May we be bound together as one. May we find comfort and hope, blessing and peace. Amen. Have we lost?